Hi, my name is Sangita Kumar, and I'm the CEO and founder of Be the Change Consulting. Join me in Liberated AF, the workplace revolution. This is a podcast where we get to explore what does it take to become the organization that we want to work for. So what is that? The organization I want to work for, it supports my humanity and makes me feel like I belong. It's a place that isn't racist, it isn't extractive. It works for the boomers and the Gen Alphas. There's space for everyone to bring their genius to work. Don't we want to become that? And don't we want to create that? So I have been studying organizational dynamics for over 20 years, and I love working with teams stuck in an entrenched challenge to bring clarity to diverse perspectives and look for ways that human-centered systems. We're going to tell stories, we're going to answer questions, we're going to offer strategies on this podcast. Together, we are going to become something new. Let's go.
Hey, Sangita.
Good morning, Fong.
How are you doing, friend?
Today I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, no complaints.
Last week, when we were going through the comment section of our podcast, there was this really juicy one, and I'm thinking maybe we can have it part of our episode. So let me just read it for you real quick.
Okay.
It said,
I'll try to focus, but I'm really excited that we got a comment.
I know. Okay, I'm afraid to give my employee feedback because I'm afraid to be called racist. Ooh,
Oh, damn.
wow, all right, go at it.
That's a big fear. Okay,
That's a
let's
big
talk about
one.
it. So let's first think about like what this person's fear is. That's all that comment said.
That's it. It says, "I'm afraid to give my employee feedback because what happens if, I'm afraid to
They
be
think
called."
I'm racist.
Yeah,
Okay. So then it's probably so they didn't put their own identities in. So let's
yeah.
start by going from race neutral to race forward
Mhm.
or identity neutral to identity forward. So it's probably if this person's worried about being called racist for giving someone feedback, it's probably a person of do two different races. Um I guess that's all we could guess. But
Yeah.
they're like worried about like how their positional power right is going to be perceived if they're giving someone feedback. So maybe they have critical feedback to give someone.
Mm,
Maybe they're upset with someone's performance and they're like, if I say I don't think you did a good job, will I look like what I'm saying is you're not doing a good job because of your race, your racial identity, or that it is racist to think someone of a different race is not doing a good job with something.
I think, yeah, that one.
Okay. Have you ever been there?
I oh my gosh. I wanna say maybe sure. I can't nothing comes to mind right now. I maybe this is where I feel like I've been very fortunate. I've worked predominantly in place with people of color, and
Uh-huh.
I'm sure I have one. I can't think of one right now.
I don't think I'm inherently afraid to give well, so I guess there's like a couple of layers here. One is, are we afraid to give feedback in general, right? Are we nervous
Okay.
when it comes to giving feedback? And I think one of the things that makes people nervous, me included, right? So if I think about people I've coached and my own experiences in supervision, I sometimes get a little I it does sometimes trip me up when I'm seeing somebody do something and I don't like it. Then I
Mm,
have to go, do I not like it? Is it like about my preference or do I not think it's actually meeting the standard or is it not meeting the needs of this moment? Right? So is it my preference? Is it a standard or a rule that I have like there should be no typos in a document. Right? That's kind of a rule. But if there's a couple of typos in the email that you send to me, it doesn't actually change the impact of our ability to like communicate. It might be a little
mm,
distracting, right? So I think that's one thing that I've learned to just start there is like what is the feedback that I'm actually giving? And if it's preference, then I do think that like sometimes if I can't describe what it is that like here's the expectation, here's what you're currently doing. If you could do it like this, I think we could get to this outcome. So if I can't kind of like figure out how that bouncing ball connects across those ideas, I think you can deliver feedback to someone where the person on the receiving end is like, "Well, that's sure, that's not how you would do it, but I could do it like that." And now if there's like racial identity that makes us different, we could say that, "Oh, you want it like that because of your racial identity." Like, I think it's, like, that's a very dominant culture standard that you're holding. You're holding a standard of perfectionism. You're holding one right way. You're holding your approach is the only approach. And there's actually many ways to do this. And so I think that's where, if you're working in an organization where people have been invited to start to think about racial identity and the way it impacts an employee's sense of success or belonging on the team, we can start to get confused about what are our organizational standards and what our preferences and where our preferences are driven by dominant culture. And it forces us to see there's only one way to do something when actually there are many ways to do something.
Okay. So then if I'm a supervisor and I observe one of my employees and I am observing that they are not meeting the expectations of their role. So then I can and it could be something the expectation could be marked based on maybe their job description or their performance, or it could be from my preference if that's not clearly. So that's what I wanna understand, that because there are some people that might be thinking, "Well, yeah, so I have this matrix of, role description of what they should meet, the expectations. I'm observing them. They're not meeting when I observe them, I don't see that they're hitting those marks, and so I wanna give them the feedback."
Yeah. Okay, right. So there, if you at least if you have it sounds like you're describing like you have a matrix of like in this competency, this is what low, medium, and high might look
Or
like.
maybe, but I'm just like, I mean, that would be great if I had a matrix that had those different levels of experience, but I think what some leaders and supervisors are holding is like, "Oh, your job description says that you should do this," and as we know, those job descriptions do not spell out every single thing. So
Right.
that's what I'm saying, that's a starting
Yeah,
point.
okay, right, so we have these vague categories, right, in our job descriptions,
Yes.
and then when you're actually working on a project, our actual expectations are much more nuanced, right, and categorical,
Yes.
and some of us, are managing people's, like, or some employees, like, are told, like, "Get to this deliverable, how you get there is up to you," right? It depends on
Mhm.
your job, it depends on, like, the level that your level of experience or tenure. And then some people are told, no, do this task, like type up these notes in this note template, in this order, in this way, right? So then it's like there's
Yeah.
less like decision making in that kind of contained sort of task. Either way, I would start by just kind of on a piece of paper, like describing what was my expectation first.
Mm.
So I expected someone to turn in their timesheet with all of their hours, accurate in the format of the template that I gave them on time. And let's say that doesn't happen. So then I get to say, okay, what was my expectation? First of all, I lay out my expectation. Second, I write it out for myself. Second, then I say, what did they do? Did they really, like, miss the whole thing, or did they would they get it, like, 70% right, and they just missed 1 or 2 things, right? So then that can help
Mhm.
to, like, take my feel that sometimes, in supervision, we get, like, a flash of feeling like, "You're supposed to know how to do this."
Right.
And we can just calm ourselves down a little bit if we can sort of say, like, "Oh, wait, how why do I think they were supposed to know how to do this?" Did I tell them? Did they have the right templates and tools and examples to know how to do it? Is it a person who's in a role where they should be able to figure some of that out by themselves, or are they in a role where they do need more kind of structure and clarity in order to meet expectations? So that's like one place to go. And then the second place I think to go is to say, who cares what my expectation is? Right, so then if I can knock my own self out of there, right? If I can, not weight so much my expectation, like, there's, like, a way that I feel like even saying my expectation, it can easily load it up with my judgment, my value system, my needs even. And so then if I can get away from that and get to, okay, what did this person do? They got 70% of it, but they missed 3 things. Okay. So is it okay? Is it not okay? Again, that's I'm in like judgment zone. Instead,
Mhm.
I could say, have I ever had this conversation with them before? If I haven't, then I get to say, great, let's have it for the first time. And I think doing these steps before entering a conversation with an employee um, will help me come in sort of like tuned to be in right relationship with the human in front of me. And if I don't, the chances of my preference, my bias, my like cultural worldview of how things should be done could easily like dominate the conversation. And that I know that's kind of like this ambiguous thing, but if you imagine that as like a if you could concretize that as like a film, right? A screen that is in front of me between you and me, or me and my employee that I'm talking to, that's where like that's where we open ourselves up to being in a place where the employee doesn't feel like we're seeing them as a human. We're putting a bunch of expectations on them, and that feeling is dehumanizing, and it can make them go into like a defensive shape. It can invoke imposter syndrome. It can make them feel smaller, or it could put them into a fight mode where they get defensive and they say, "No, I reject this feedback. I think I did a fine job, and you just want it you're just nitpicking. You're impossible to please. You only want it done your way, and you're trying to, like, enforce your way on me in an unhealthy standard." And in that feeling, words like, "This feels racially motivated," "That feels anti-Black," "This feels anti-woman," "This feel" like, those words can an employee can easily start to feel those, um, feel like something oppressive is happening and and start labeling what's happening as these isms, which then becomes really hard to work through. Does that
Mhm.
make sense? Like it's
Yeah, okay. So I I love how you took us down where you had said that from that expectations, whatever that may be, then going to a place of curiosity during the observation. And there was a couple pauses in that observations of like holding self-awareness as a supervisor and as a leader of going, is this my own preference? Is this my own judgment? Or is this a standard set? And having those grappling with that a little bit, doing all that self-work first before even having the conversation. So that I I'm with you there. Now you started off taking us through this journey by naming by understanding the person who's asking this question is that they were holding identity neutrality and that they need to go into identity forward. So I think that might be the thing. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that's what it is like this person's fear of I'm afraid to give my employee feedback. I don't want to be called a racist. And I think that really that fear of being called a racist is the breeding ground of identity neutrality. Is that right?
mm.
But you've mentioned this a couple times in some of the other episodes before. So I don't know, does that make
Yeah, so it's like the first step, the first thing that we just kind of went through is like,
yeah.
what is the feedback that there is to be delivered? So let's
Mhm.
workshop that. Now we can come to this. Like, now how do I deliver this feedback? We're trying to get a sense of like what might show up in between
Mm,
in our relationship as I try to deliver this feedback.
okay.
So let's assume that I've unpacked my own feedback for my employee and I'm like, "Oh no, it's not a problem that they didn't know this. I get to name that they don't know this, right? So I'm not shaming you for not knowing it and I'm not blaming you for not knowing it. So that's my internal work. I am here to explain to you, you did this. What I'd love to see is this. Let's figure out how we can get you there. Can you see
Mhm.
what would happen differently if you were doing it that way? Right? So now I'm clear what the content is that I want to say. Now if I go into identity forwardness, all right, well, I am, what are some of my identities compared to the person that I'm supervising? Say
Mm.
some of my identities are, I'm a cisgendered woman, I'm South Asian, um, I'm married, I have a child, I'm in my mid 40s. So I just list a bunch of identities. I don't know if any of those are like gonna
Yeah.
antagonize the relationship or not. I'm just naming my some of my own identities. It's just to be aware of it, right? And then I can think, okay, let's just say I'm talking to Fong. I might think, who is Fong? Like, um,
Mhm.
where might Fong and I what are some of Fong's identities? Okay, well, Fong is also a parent, Fong is also married, Fong is also a cisgender woman, Fong is also Asian, different Asian background than mine, different family structure, what's Fong's work style, right? So I can start to like
Yeah.
think about where we might be similar and where we might be different. And right there, when I do that, I am like, I get really clear. You and I have so many ways that we are similar.
Mhm.
And if I'm like, how might we be different? Oh, okay, my position in this organization is different than yours. I am an owner. I see the money differently. So, okay, maybe in that I might end up sort of like shading that difference might show up in the way I talk. And if I'm not careful about that way that difference, like what could happen, right? So then I can ask myself, what might happen because there is this one aspect of difference
And
between,
that's actually only one difference that is
and
actually
that's
a really
one.
different that's only one difference.
Imagine, and there are definitely differences between
Yeah,
us,
yeah, yeah.
from these obvious ones.
Right.
If I don't, think about, okay, how might my framing of something as an owner might, be different, how might it influence the way I think about something versus differently than you? Now that's something that we could sort of, like, study or we could talk about. Let's say it was a more, like, contrasting racial difference. Let's just say I'm a white man, giving feedback to a black woman, right? Something that's, like, a little more I hear a lot of, like, that's a little more polarizing, and I think people get more worried in that scenario,
Yeah.
um, which thank goodness for these people who are worried about it and are aware of it. So let's just celebrate that, right? That there's even a consciousness that, this might not
Mhm.
go well if I'm not careful.
Yeah.
So we take that feeling of like, "Oh, I'm afraid," and I get to celebrate that person. If I was coaching this person, I would say, good job for being aware that this is a potential area of difference and it might show up in your coaching relationship, especially when you're going to give feedback and especially when you think this person might be sensitive to both the content of the feedback. If you're worried about the content of the feedback, you definitely need to be more careful about the way you deliver the feedback. It's not that we need to back away from it. We want to be gentle and human-centered about it. So good job for knowing that something needs to be attended to here. So we can celebrate that. And then we get to go, all right, how might that person might generate for themselves? How might identity, show up differently? And maybe they have no idea. They don't really know why a white man might see something, in one way, and a black woman might perceive, quality or what was useful or what was valuable or what was the right approach, why that could be possibly different. Maybe this person is so like, but this is the right way to do something. And I get that they might be offended by it, but they have to do it this other way. I don't see how race shows up in this analysis.
Mhm.
Okay, so then what I think you do is you bring it into you just be, again, instead of being identity neutral, you bring it into your conversation with this person. So assuming you have some level of
Yeah.
relationship, right? I might say to this person, "Hey, I want to give you I want to unpack, this thing that you just did in the spirit of growth and development, but also in building our relational understanding of what, our expectations are. Let's unpack our expectations together." So here was the task, turning in your timesheet. I'm saying something really simple and minute, right? Just to make it something universally that we can all see it. So here's the timesheet. What would you say, success in turning in this timesheet is? So you brainstorm some things. I go, great. I love those ideas. These are some of the other things that I would add to this. So we co-create. So you start by some co-construction of expectation. That right there is an anti-racist
Yep.
supervision move, right? So instead of saying, "I wanna deliver feedback to you as though my truth is the only truth," r I'm shifting my language to
Mm,
say, "I wanna unpack this task together. I want to co-construct what our expectations of quality are. I wanna hear from you," and I'm adding my own in. So I'm not saying this is like a half day retreat, right? This happens in like 15 minutes. And definitely if you have an employee who you have some sense of relationship with and they care about their job, they're gonna know feedback is coming. They're gonna sense it, right? And so my job is to not hold back on my sense of on my what the standards are. Right, so if you say 3 things, I'm like even if in my mind I'm like, "Those are, like, the least important things," I don't need to
mhm,
say that part out loud. I can say, "Great, those are" it's good to see those are the things you're attuning to. And the anti-racist move for me in that moment, or let's say I'm this white man, talking to this black woman, what she says is like his clues into understanding what she sees as the priority from her perspective. And let's say it's very different from what he sees as his priority. That right there is the difference, right? That perspective and background are bringing that's making her see the task one way and him seeing the task another way. And where racism can happen there is if he says, "No, what you care about doesn't matter. Only what I care about matters."
mm.
Instead of that, we get to say, "Great, let's come up with a way to get to this deliverable that honors what you want and what I want." And I have to say, as a supervisor, the things that I think are important are not what I prefer, right? It's not my so this is where my first step really matters.
Yeah.
It can't be I really like emails that are in bullet format, and the way you're writing an email that tells, like, this whole story is kind of like, it takes a long time to read and kind of exhausting, and it's not professional, right?
Mm.
If I just label it as unprofessional, I'm gonna tank our relationship. I
Yeah.
get to say, "I get that you value clarity, you value the story, you value giving a lot of context. I value, I value, like, kind of like, sharpness and clear takeaways. So how about this? You write your whole email at the bottom, just give 3 bullet points that summarizes the takeaways." So I have to figure out a win-win, or I have to figure out how to convince them that there is a real business purpose for doing it a different way. It can't be about my preference. If it becomes about preference, it's gonna feel like dominant culture or different cultures are deciding what's good or bad.
Well, I mean, I like what you said here is if it's just on your preference, then you're holding that your truth is the truth. It's the only truth.
Yeah, and we all know there's no such thing as that. There's many
There's
truths.
no such thing as that. And, that from that co-creation of understanding what the expectation is, then creates language and transparency and understanding. And again, you're taking us through it and there's such a flow to it. And it sounds like a lot a lot of time. It sounds like a lot of time that someone would have to you took us through this episode, it's like less than 20 minutes. And so this particular listener, what would your response be for them? They're gonna listen to this, episode,
Mhm.
and they're afraid to be called racist.
Mhm. I mean, I wonder if it really all depends on how much relationship they have already. If
Mm.
you have a really strong relationship with the person you're supervising, then you could say, "Hey, I wanna unpack some feedback with you. Let's just start by, acknowledging, like, that, feedback doesn't always land well to people. What can we do to make sure, you're
Mm.
ready to receive it? What do you know about how you like to get feedback?" So if you don't have a strong, like, a lot of relationship, you
Yeah.
build the relationship in your culture of feedback. So before diving into it, just have a conversation. And you don't have to say, "As a white man, I like feedback like this. Black people like feedback like that." Like, that will sound that is racist too.
That is racist.
It's more, how do you like to hear it in an email first? Do you like to, know in advance that I wanna give you feedback, or should we just build it into our check-ins? But even better than that is you always have a moment for feedback in your check-ins. "What feedback do you have for me? What feedback, do I have for you? Let's just think about it. Let's keep practicing giving feedback on little things so that the big things we've built some muscle memory to
Yeah.
get to the big things. And then I definitely like I feel like the thing about racism, it happens if you act like race does not exist, but some part of your brain is conscious that race exists. Like,
Right.
why do that? Now you're rattling your amphibian brain and your prefrontal cortex, the part
Mm.
of so it's like you're dysregulated on both sides. You can also start by saying, um, I'm concerned this might come across as racist to you. So I'm gonna share what I have to say and then let's just see like, does this feel racially coded to you? Because maybe I'm missing something.
Mm.
You put it on the table. My experience is if people with positional power name it first, you're taking the labor off of your employee and, but this is why you have to have a relationship because if you start to name things like that, some institutions will say, now we're opening ourselves up for liability. That
Mhm.
that person might say, no, that did sound racist, and you admitted that it was racist, and now we're in trouble. So the culture of the organization really matters. Like, how explicit can you be? If you can't be that explicit, then you just move from a more human-centered way. How do you
Right.
want to get this feedback? I'm gonna give you this feedback as clearly as I can. I've done my work to unpack if it's, like, my own preference. I really think that you're gonna get to a better outcome if you can do this one thing slightly differently. Are you open to hearing it? Like, just a little bit of that coding of, like, "I see you as a person. I care. I wanna invest in your growth." That's what shifts from being extractive top down to being, like, human-centered, relational, that we're conspiring for each other's growth.
Yes. Can we just do more of that? Can we be just conspiring for one another's success? I hope this information was helpful. You reference a couple things, and I know you read a lot. So, for those people who want to dive in a little bit more and learn more around identity forward, race forward, do you have some podcasts or books top of mind that you can share right now? And then we can also drop it in the show notes too.
I think if you Google, dominant culture characteristics or white supremacy characteristics in organizations, you'll we love this research that has these examples of dominant culture, characteristics that come from dominant culture that often get absorbed into organization as though that's the norm. So
Okay.
we'll link that in the show notes.
Well, we hope that was helpful. And thank you, whoever you are, for dropping that first
Oh
comment.
my god, good luck.
I know, like Sangita said, also brava for holding that awareness and wanting to do the work for it. So we hope this was helpful. We love to hear your comments. And until the next time, we are liberated AF, a workplace revolution. Bye, y'all.
Let's do it. Bye, all.
We hope this conversation provided helpful insight and inspired you to create a more inclusive and liberated workplace. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. Your support makes a huge difference in helping us reach more listeners like you. We love to hear your thoughts on today's topic. Connect with us on social media and drop a comment. You can find all the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.